The psycho that ripped two dogs in bits. This happened to me about 8 years ago. Note, at the time I was 15 years old and I am a female. We lived on 3 acres in wooden bungalow-style house in Speewah, Australia, far north Queensland, in the middle of a thick rainforest. I live in the granny flat away from the house as I was older than my brother. I was the type of girl that would grab my iPod in a hoodie and spend all day in the forest, getting soaked from the rain. Even though we hung private property signs everywhere, we would still have people walking through the forest and having picnics on our bottom paddock. We eventually reinforced our fences and made the signs giant to stop people. It was great having a place like that, but it was also a creepy place too, not the kind you want to be alone in. We had heaps of creepy things happen to us, especially on our midnight walks, but I may post them another time. We've been there for about a year by the time of this event occurred, and there was a guy that had been breaking into houses in our area, defecating and urinating on people's rugs and floors. He would also slowly move furniture and items in a house, making the owner feel like they were going insane. The police didn't really take this report seriously, till one day, a lady opened her garbage bin to see if it had been emptied, and found her 2 dogs torn to pieces in the bin. They were so badly mutilated that the only way she knew it was her dogs were from the collars. Police began to patrol the area. This guy was around 30 to 40 years old, and had a scruffy, unkempt beard, snow-pale skin, and always had a blank expression. He would always be seen near the scene, or fleeing from the home, but was never caught, nor did anyone recognize him from the area. A week after this incident, I had my best friend sleep over. We love horror movies, and as usual, had a marathon of movies that night. Occasionally, we would hear things outside my windows while watching the movies. My windows were French door styles, and at that time of year, we would leave them open because it was so humid. There were no screens on them, so potentially, someone could just put their leg over the window pane and basically be in my room as the window was lower to the ground. I leave them open for my cat to come and go while we were up. The noises did creep us out, but we would laugh it off and say it was Pepper, my cat, or my brother and his friends or dad that would try and constantly scare us. It didn't work, but my friends were scared shitless every single time. We finished our last movie at around 3 a.m. as normal, and by that time Pepper and my friend were asleep, along with the rest of the household. I closed my windows, locked my door, which had an old-fashioned key, so it was harder to unlock, turned everything off and got into bed. My friend had woken up as I pulled the blanket back, so he started to talk quietly. As we were talking, we would stop, and because we could hear what sounded like someone walking in the small pebbles that were just outside my window. First couple of times we laughed, thinking the movies got to our heads, then the moonlight faded in and out, as if something passed. But the windows, that's when we freaked out. Speewah is situated on top of a mountain range, so I couldn't call my parents or for help, as there's no service, so instead, I grabbed the metal and wooden baseball bats that I have by my bed and got one each. Pepper at this point was in my lap, hissing at the windows. A couple minutes passed, and there was nothing. Just as I was about to go and try and call out for my parents, usually cannot hear me that far away, when one of the windows went dark, and you can make out the outline of a guy. My friend dug her head into my side, hiding her face. We froze and watched in horror as he tried to open the window, obviously, not noticing that we could see him. I put my lips down to my friend's ear and whispered as quietly as possible to her that he hasn't seen us, and I told her to slowly slip off the bed and hide beside it as my side was towards the window. Naturally, I wanted to go into flight mode and run, but I decided to man up, and I knew I had to protect my friend as I was a lot stronger than her. As she tried to slide off the bed, but the blanket pulled a can of fizzy off her bedside table and hit the floor. His head snapped up, looking straight at us. This is what scared us the most. He began to smile and said, "Hello, pretties," and started to do something for his pants. That took me a couple seconds to realize. This sick creep had his pants down and was masturbating. "Leave us alone," my friend basically choked out because she was shaking from fright. That's when he started to pull on the windows harder. I sprung off the bed, grabbed my friend and shoved her into my walk-in wardrobe with Pepper and told her to look for the megaphone in my costume bag somewhere in there. I had it as a prop for a play I did at school, but it actually worked. It was extremely loud. I told her to lock the door just in case. I stood in between the closet and the window with a wooden bat in my hand. "What you gonna do with that, sweetie?" he said in the creepiest voice I've ever heard that made my hair stand up on ends, and pointed to the bat. "I'll kill you before I let you hurt her," I yelled, referring to my friend, just as one of the hinges cracked and came loose, my friend burst out from the wardrobe and into the bathroom with the megaphone up to the window, which was the closest to the house, and at maximum volume screamed for my parents. Within seconds, Dad came rushing out with his bat. Yes, we all had some kind of protection, but by then the creep was gone. We made a police report, but nothing came of it, and he was never found. He'd leave messages for us scratched in our trees near our driveway, on the back of our cars like, "I like your new hair color. I like your new panties. I will kill you all." But eventually they completely stopped after a month or so. We had the windows and doors replaced and reinforced after that. Thankfully, we now live in another state. But that just has to be one of the scariest nights of my life. Psycho army guy turned killer. Hello everyone. I would like to share a chilling experience with you guys. I'm new to posting on here, but will try my best to go by the guidelines, and also I'm no writer, so please don't be too harsh. This is actually about my cousin and her life, although I was involved in her life. We were close, and lived right down the road from each other at the time that all this was going on. So anyways, on with the story. My cousin, we'll call her Anne. She got married around 2010 to this guy that was in the army at the time. His name was Brad. I'm going to mention that names have been changed to protect their privacy. So when they got married, it was out of the blue and all happened very fast. Anne was only around 21 years old at the time, but she had a little girl that was 1 year old when they married. Our kids were the same age, only a 2-week difference on age, so they would often come over so our kiddos could play together. As time went by, we all kinda got used to Brad. He was very high-strung and just had a typical army guy feel to him. My boyfriend at the time and Brad started to become pretty good friends, so it went from letting the kids play every once in a while to an every weekend get-together at our house or theirs. It was fun. We would grill and hang out and let the kids play, but I started to notice little things about how Brad would treat Anne in front of us. It started small, with him just nitpicking with her overly absolutely nothing, to him just snapping and blowing up literally for no good reason at all. All this kind of stuff continued to get worse and worse every time we would hang out with them. Then one day, Anne came over to our house upset and crying, saying that Brad had gotten physical with her, and hit her and pushed her off their porch in broad daylight for the entire world to see. She was all banged up head to toe. This was not the last time it happened. We begged her to leave him and to get away from it before it got really, really bad. Finally, in 2012, she had enough of this abuse and she left him. She couldn't tell anyone where she was going, not even us, because she was in such fear for her life. She was scared he would find her if anyone knew. He tried his best to get to her and would find her where she was. He would stalk her kids' daycare, wait around by her parents' house to see if he could catch her over there. Just scary kind of behavior. One day she agreed to meet him in town in a spot with lots of people around so he could say his goodbyes to the child. He used the baby against her. He had actually adopted her during their marriage, so he used that as a ploy to get her to come around. They met that day, and as soon as she got out of the car with her baby, he ripped the kid out of her arms and took off with her gun. She was frantic, scared to death. Didn't know what his intentions were with the kid. She called us and the police could not do anything because his name was on the BC birth certificate, and so that legally made him the father with equal rights to the child. This was a terrible situation, needless to say. She had to play by his rules just to get her baby back. He finally answered his phone, and he told her the only way she would see the girl again was if she agreed to come back to him and put all this in the past. She agreed, but not without her own plan in motion. She told him she was ready to come back with him, and he came to meet up with her, and the cops were waiting because at this point, her family had told the police, and that he was a threat to them all. And as soon as he pulled up and got out with the baby, they arrested him. This is where the story ends basically for my cousin and him. She immediately filed for protection, filed for divorce, and sole custody of the child. She hid out the entire time all this was going on, and he finally, after a few weeks, gave up looking for her and started dating this other young girl named Brianna. She was only 19 years old and also had a 2 or 3 year old baby girl too. The weird thing about this whole situation is that it was like he was using this girl to literally take the place of Anne, Brianna. They had so much in common, it was eerie. So they dated for a few weeks, when he then convinced her to come stay with him in another state. The next state over from us. He was working a construction job over there, and he claimed he wanted her and the baby to be with him while he was out of town. Now mind you, they had barely even known each other at this point. They were together for like 2 weeks, and from what I was told, he had already asked her to marry him. Anyways, I'm not sure of all the details, but Anne called me up one day in August of 2012 and told me that the girl Brad was with was missing in the other state, where she knew not a soul but him and her child. Well, they ended up finding her body a while later in a field miles away from where they were staying. He had killed her, set her body on fire, and then threw her away in a field. The most disturbing part of all this was that he had her little baby with him the entire time. I can't imagine what it must have been like for Brianna and her poor baby. They arrested Brad and he was charged with capital murder and held on a very high bond. I can't believe he would do such a terrible thing to this young girl who had her entire life ahead of her and a baby in front of her at that. So needless to say, I hope we never meet again, Brad, and I hope you pay for what you've done. This very well could have been Anne if she hadn't gotten away, and my thoughts were that he was so enraged with Anne, he took it out on this other girl. Thanks for reading, everyone. Some crazy mother trucker. So, just found this sub, and I've been digging reading all your stories. I don't have anything about creepy smelling elderly stalkers or the like, but I do have one incident that my brain flashes back to every now and again. Back in middle school, I used to walk home after. Normally I had a couple of friends make the trek with me, and we had some fun times throughout the years. We played witness to a car accident, performed a funeral for a dying bird we found on the sidewalk, and other childhood adventure type things. The thing that sticks out the most to me is one of the times I had to walk home alone. Our city had a population of about 30,000, so it's not necessarily small. Strangers often abound walking the streets or driving past, especially just after school hours. For some reason, the major road I was using was entirely empty. This was in the middle of the day, mind you, so it wasn't in any way a scary or suspicious setting. Out of nowhere, I heard a car honking from behind, and I swung around to see what was going on. A big white truck was the only one on the road, and it was a couple blocks away. Just as I started to turn back around, I heard it rev its engine. I looked at it again, and by this time it was going about 10 miles per hour faster, and it hopped the curb as well. It drove up onto the sidewalk, and I had to jump out of the way to avoid being hit by it. I picked myself up off the ground, scraped knee and grass stains, and tried to shake off the experience. They must have lost control of their vehicle or something like that, and I was lucky to have gotten out of the way. At that point, I was just laughing at the near-death anxiety and continued my journey home. That is, I was laughing until I saw the truck pull out a couple blocks in front of me this time. I slowed. Maybe they were coming to apologize. My theory was shot down when I heard the honk again and the revving of the engine. It was speeding back my way. This time I crossed into the wrong lane to get on my side of the road. For a second, I was paralyzed. As it hopped up the curb again, I knew they weren't playing around. Luckily this time, I had more time to react. Almost as a reflex, I jumped over the nearest fence as I had hoped. They seemed uninterested in both vehicle manslaughter and destruction of property, and straightened themselves back out off the curb and into their lane. They drove off at a normal speed as if nothing even ever happened. I spent the rest of the walk home weaving in and out of backyards in case they were planning to try a third time. Unfortunately, I didn't think I got a license plate number. Keep in mind, I was in middle school. Honestly, my memory has been garbage, so I doubt I would have kept it in there anyways. In the end, I never found out who it was. No one came forward, saying that they were pranking me, and I never saw the white truck again. It would have made more sense if it was a group of rowdy teenagers or something, but I remember only seeing one man in the driver's seat. No Shazier grin, no meth-out tweaker, just a blank-faced middle-aged man who was apparently in the mood to run over a child. After meeting this kid, I'm changing schools. Before I get into this story, I had somebody request to make a YouTube video on my story, and I'm always okay with it. Also, I might not post much because creepy things and creepy people haven't been encountered, so I've only got about like 2 more stories. Anyways, enjoy. I met this kid for the story I'll call Joey only 3 weeks ago. He was new, and if you know, I always try to welcome new students. He came to my school from California, and was in the same grade as me. Joey, I could tell, was weird, but I brushed it off because in a way, I thought everyone was or had been at one point in their lives. Anyways, I showed him around and introduced him to some other kids and teachers so he could feel a little more comfortable at school. He randomly started hanging out with me during lunch, even if I was walking across the street, to get it, but I honestly didn't care. I saw what I thought was him getting along with my other friend who I'll call Ethan. After a few days of him following us and talking to us, Ethan had come over to me privately during lunch. He was telling me that Joey was showing him, as Joey called them, memes, but they were videos of weird shit, like cats dying, or 2 men 1 ice pick video. I casually brushed this off because Ethan was the weird friend of our group, so I thought he was just joking around. It had been about 2 weeks since Joey arrived, and I noticed that Joey was starting to follow me and Ethan more excessively. It got to the point where he would sometimes follow me or Ethan when we walked home, and it got to the point where he literally stood outside mine or Ethan's house. I didn't want to be mean, but I wanted to talk to Joey, and I told him that my mom said we can't hang out together anymore, and although he didn't follow during lunch, he still followed me home. I got angry and told him that he was fucking weird, and I told him to leave me alone, which made him mad, and this crazy actually came to my door and opened in and tried to walk inside. I for some reason didn't call the cops, but when he got out of my house, I called my mom and explained the situation. She moved me in with my dad, and I currently am in the process of changing schools. I have not seen this kid since, and my mom said he hasn't showed back up at the house in the past few days. Hopefully we'll keep it that way, and I never see that real-life psycho ever again. The cat videos were literally cats being suffocated, drowned, and mutilated, and I never want to see anything like this. The Exhibitionist. I was barely 12 years old at the time, and since my parents are devout Christians, I lived a sheltered life. That meant no pornographic content was ever shown to us. Even shows where the clothes worn by celebrities deemed inappropriate by my parents were blocked. That also meant going to church every single Sunday, and after that, we'd go to the mall in our Sunday dresses. My dad had a small van just enough to fit a family of 5, and a small space in the back for shopping bags we get during our trips to the mall. That fateful Sunday morning, we were traveling to the mall, my 2 sisters napping beside me, while I gazed at passing cars and familiar buildings, listening to my mom and dad talking about the priest's sermon. Dad stopped when the traffic light turned to red, and I was staring at the pedestrians walking just to keep myself occupied, you know? But then, a guy stopped right in the middle of the street, wearing a long, dirty coat that even my young mind concluded was the only clothing he was wearing. There was also a sick, elated grin plastered on his face. Before my mom could turn around and cover my eyes, the man opened his coat wide and spread his legs apart, and the driver beside us said, "Fuck, what a psycho," in a sort of surprised and amused tone. My mom told me to look the other way, but she didn't have to tell me. I was already staring down into my hands, my brows knitted in confusion. I knew what I saw. Our science teacher already taught us about the reproductive systems. I knew what it was, but I wondered why he had shown it on such a busy and crowded street. Even after a fellow pedestrian tackled him and dragged him back to the sidewalk, he was still grinning like a maniac. The traffic light signaled back to green, but I still caught a glimpse of an officer handcuffing the man. I shortly forgot about that bizarre incident while we were walking around the mall, and I only remembered it during our lunch. I asked my mom why the man did that, and even now I can still recall how she paled and grasped for words. She couldn't farm. That's when my dad intervened. He told me that guys like him were mentally ill, and that what he did was wrong. He told me that it was my best interest to forget the whole incident, and that when I encountered one again, which he said he hoped would never happen, I should stay as far away as possible and call for help from the police. And now, after about 8 years, I haven't met another one of these creeps, fortunately. I hope just that it stays that way. Witsec Neighbors. We lived on the east side of St. Paul in the early 70s, in a duplex on the bottom apartment. Upstairs, there was a family of 4, a mom, dad, and 2 kids, one about 13 years old and the other 3. I was 4 years old at the time, but I remembered every detail of this house and every detail of that family and the following events. I was 4 years old in the early 70s, and it was not uncommon for kids to be out playing at that age. Both myself and the 3-year-old from upstairs were playing in the front yard. I don't remember how the idea came to us that we should walk around the block, but that's just what we did. When our little legs finally carried us back home, the adults were in the front yard looking rather upset. Apparently, the 3-year-old's mother had been hysterical when she couldn't find her son. I apologized, and being a year older, it was considered my fault. A few days later, the 13-year-old told me that he had a surprise for me and that I should go on a walk with him. He said that he told my mom that it was okay as long as we weren't gone long. It seemed like we walked forever, and we were gone a long time when we came to an open, heavily weeded area. He told me he saw a deer in the weeds, and I should go in there and see. He said deer wasn't afraid of little kids, but that it might be afraid of him. I walked into the weeds and looked around for a minute and came back out. The 13-year-old was nowhere to be seen. He had ditched me. I started walking. I wasn't sure which way to go or where I was, but I just walked and cried. It got dark, then light. I don't remember seeing a sense of time, but eventually I saw a street with houses and a few shops. I must have wandered into the street because I heard the sounds of brakes and looked up to see a UPS truck just feet from me. At 4, it looked as big as a house. There was a blonde woman driving it. She asked my name and where I lived. I could only give my name. She placed me in the truck and drove me back to her house. I heard her on her phone calling police and telling them she thought she had the missing girl. She gave me a great popsicle, and I played with her kids until the police showed up. The police brought me home, and again, all the adults and kids were outside. My mom was crying and holding me until the police left. Only then did I tell her, "Butch ditched me." She turned to look at him, and his only words before he went back into the house were, "Now you know how my mom felt." Nothing else happened to Butch for taking me. In fact, nothing happened to him when a month later, he shot an 11-year-old boy from his bedroom window and killed him. He was released in custody of his parents. Not long after that, the family disappeared in the middle of the night, which convinced my parents they must have been under witness protection. Butch, you psycho freak, let's not meet again. I was a creepy caller that got caught. This all happened when I was around 17 years old, currently 22. Also, I'm female. In the beginning of what I believe was my senior year. The summer was just about to come to an end. A few months before this, I had gotten out of a relationship. I was starting to move on, and everything was actually going well for me. I wasn't really looking for anybody to be with, but I wasn't not ready either, you know? So there was a huge event parade going on in the city. This event was kind of a big deal, so a whole bunch of people from the city's surrounding towns always came in to participate, including myself. Public transportations are usually packed, so you end up meeting random people and making new friends fairly fast. I went with 4 other friends by taking the rail. Halfway there, we've talked and met to a whole bunch of people. We ended up next to another party as usual, and this really cute guy noticed that I was wearing flip-flops and commented on how bad he felt for me. Our group ended up talking to each other for a pretty long time. None of us introduced ourselves to each other, and when we got to the city, we eventually separated. It wasn't until the next day that I was looking through Flickr for photos from the event that I spied out the cute guy from the rail. He was so cute to me, so I got stalkerish and scanned the thousands of photos for more photos of him. I kept searching and searching until I found a picture that would link me to him. I don't remember exactly how it linked me to his MySpace, but there I was. I was hesitant to send a friend request because of how weird that might have been. The fact that he never even told me his name, Matt. So how I even found his MySpace was weird enough, but I closed my eyes and sent the request anyways. I was blessed with a friendly response. I forgot what he said exactly, but he said, "Hi, I remember me from the event." He was super nice whenever he talked to me. We both had similar tastes in a variety of things. Eventually we exchanged numbers. After getting to know him, I started to grow a crush on him. Then I started to grow obsessive. I'm not entirely sure why, but I'm pretty sure I looked at every pixel, photo, and page on his MySpace. I looked into who was in the photos with him, who he'd been to prom with, who his family was, who his ex was, just everything. I had a huge obsessive crush. His friends had videos where he would be in parts of them, and I would search for more and more videos just to hear his voice. Next thing you know, I was replaying a YouTube video on my flat screen through the Wii on him on just repeat, just a 5-second part repeatedly, so I can hear his voice. I smiled every time I heard it scrolling through his photos. He ended up asking me to go on a date to see a movie we were both interested in. He asked me a few weeks ahead because I remember it felt like forever. We'd text each other occasionally and talk about how excited we were to go. One day when the videos weren't enough for me, I decided to try something new out. I called him on my phone, but blocked my number. He would pick up and say hello, hello, but I wouldn't say anything. I just wanted to hear his voice and maybe hear what he was doing in the background. After the second hello, he would hang up. I called again, same thing, hello, hello, and then I called again and again and again. Eventually he stopped picking up, but that didn't stop me from doing it. I did this again on 3 separate nights. On the third night that I did this, I stopped calling again because he had stopped picking up. A few minutes later, I got the most mortifying text from Matt. "Hey, were you calling me?" Playing dumb, I said, "No, what are you talking about?" And he goes, "My phone says you called me." I quickly go to my call log and sure enough, I forgot to block my number at the last call. Me not knowing how to handle this situation, I completely panic and sent him obnoxious text like, oh my god, that's so weird, service provider is messing up. I literally cannot express how much cringe when I think about how I reacted. What was even funny? He then posts a screenshot of his call log that goes, blocked ID, blocked ID, blocked ID, blocked ID, and my name. Proof that you were the one calling me, of course. I replied with, oh my god, that's so weird. A few days after that, I was mortified by our date coming up. I didn't want to bring up what happened, but he started talking to me like everything was normal. Trust me, I was surprised too. We still went on the date. The day was basically a normal hangout, but nothing special happened. No kiss, no hand holding. The movie was horrible, but we ended up with just him dropping me off at home. After the date, we never planned to hang out again. We would text each other here and there, but he started texting less. This was understandable because of how fucking weird and psycho I must look to him. But then, we would have random moments where we would text each other like how it was before, and then it would get quiet again. Eventually we stopped talking. When I got back with my ex-boyfriend, he got a few girlfriends I believe since then. We don't really talk today, but still follow each other on Instagram and Twitter, and he's my friend on Facebook. He never asked me how I found his MySpace back then, and he never brought up the phone call incident after that. It's just weird because since he started to go to community college, we ended up having a lot of mutual friends. I cringe every time I think about the phone calls. I cringe at how I'm 99% sure his friends know me of a psycho, which I am, for what I did. I'll admit it. Crazy Man Off Tinder. So this just happened today. Against my better judgment, at the beginning of the month, I got a Tinder. I matched with a few guys, etc. One of them is James. We ended up texting each other and he seemed pretty chill and pretty into me. He's a decent looking guy, and we seemed to click. He had apparently been in a relatively abusive relationship with a woman, and he was looking to start over. According to him, she had hit him with a frying pan and pepper sprayed him once. She kept going on about how crazy she was. Alright, it happens. We went out to the movies this past Friday and I had a great time. We ended up talking for a few hours, and we hit it off pretty well. I asked about the ex because I was a bit curious as to why'd he stay with someone like that. He didn't say anything positive about her, just that she was crazy, had mental illnesses, and didn't take her meds, to be honest. That kind of stuff. She had tried to baby trap him, but she had a miscarriage. He expressed relief that she didn't end up with a kid. He said he felt obligated to her. Again, I get that. In all, I had a good time. This morning rolls around, and he tells me that he had hooked up with his ex last night, and that he was going to try and work things out with her. Mildly insulted, to be honest, that I lost out to an abusive chick, but whatever. I tell him it's cool. He then a few hours later texted me to say that she was crazy, and he thought she was changing, but she wasn't, blah blah blah. He kept asking if he could see me. He was being very pushy about wanting to see me today. He begged for 5 minutes of my time so he could explain to me. I politely told him that I didn't want to be involved with someone who was so clearly hung up on his ex. That's where it got nuts. He admitted he was still, but that he wanted to see me today so that I could meet her and she could determine if I was better for him than she was, and that she wanted him to be happy because he and I had a connection. I flipped after that, told him that the fact that he needed his ex to determine who was right for him was absolutely nuts, and that it's not what love is, and that I wanted no part of it at all. His ex started texting me after that, and it was non-stop insults and an incoherent shit that made no sense. She also dropped a bomb that she was his wife. I told her to fuck off, basically, and block the number. I went on Tinder to message him where I called him a piece of shit, and if he was intelligent, he should leave her and never message me again. He started to harass me, saying that I was miserable because they have a beautiful love together and all this crazy shit. He went on to say, like, my wife knows where you work. I hope she doesn't do anything rash. And I told him that if that was a threat, I would gladly go to the police. He then said that she'd been to jail before, she's not afraid, and that she loves him so much, she'd fucked anyone up and risk jail for him, and she'd kill my friends if they tried to protect me, and that she's armed and dangerous. I told him goodbye, reported him, and deleted my Tinder account. I did go to the police tonight, but since it wasn't a direct threat, they can't do much. The cops think that James was more or less full of shit just trying to scare me, since some people love getting off on that shit. He said I did the right thing by blocking him and reporting him, and said I should keep my eyes open and alert the people at my job. Scary thing is, James seemed perfectly normal, but he lied about being married, how he felt towards his wife, and he flipped like a switch. His excuse for not being upfront about being married was that they were going to get a divorce. He seemed so docile and unassuming, and the hatred and aggressive attitude was insane. I have to honestly wonder what would have happened if I had gone to talk for 5 minutes. I'm kind of concerned since they do know where I work, but if either of them try anything, then the cops can actually nail them. What a weekend!